Hi, my name is Chris McAllister. Welcome to the Sight Shift Podcast. If you've ever found yourself in that tense place of leadership where big goals collide with deep conviction, there's an old word for that. It's called wilderness. And when you're in the wilderness, in the uncertainty, you're in a beautiful place because that's where you can find ancient wisdom. For ambitious, faith-driven leaders, I want you to know there's a way forward, and you're not a bad leader to be where you are. We're going to help you in this podcast take all of those moments and use them to make culture your edge in your team, in your organization, in your family.
Well, welcome into the Sight Shift Podcast once again. He's Chris. I'm Mark. So good to have you along with us as always. And we are in this series for the book Lead for Impact.
Crazy.
We're deep into the series. I think we have this one and maybe another episode before we finish this series. But here's the fun thing we get to do today.
I like fun.
We get to talk about puberty.
Whoa.
Did not see that coming, did you? Actually, we're not really talking about puberty in that way, but we are kind of talking about puberty and development and adolescence, and so we're going to have a little bit of fun with that today. Adolescence. Let's pick on that word. It's maybe a little safer, better than puberty. Tell us why adolescence is a concept that comes into the book and into this chapter in this specific spot.
Yeah. So, we're trying to frame this idea that if you met an 18-year-old in 1880, were you meeting an adult? It's super fun to ask audiences this.
Do you ever get a no, by the way?
I have never gotten a no.
It's an easy yes.
It's low-hanging fruit. To imagine all they could do in 1880. And then I'll ask this question. I'll say, in 2025, if you meet an 18-year-old, are you meeting an adult? And the comparison to that, you can feel the groan, you can feel the pain in the audience, and then the answer everyone says is no.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't a denigration. And part of this conversation, even with my kids, misunderstandings that occur out of this are like, oh my gosh, if your child lives at home, you failed in some way. And I want to be really clear, that is not what we're saying, because there are plenty of opportunities and experiences and examples where kids are on a healthy self-development path and they're just living at home a little bit longer.
I have that. You have that.
Boom. So, what we're thinking more about, because I put that in front of my kids, like, hey, let's think about savings on college if you want to commute. And so two of them have wanted to do that, and I freaking love it. We're more thinking about this pathway to becoming a self-directed, empowered adult. And so what we did in 1880 to try to think we're helping, we introduced something called adolescence into the human race. And the provocative thing here is it doesn't occur in nature. So there's no in-between period where you're finding yourself in nature. The mama bird doesn't push the baby bird out of the nest and say, hey, take 6 to 7 years to find yourself, and then it's going to end bad. And I think we shared this in an earlier episode, but it's still a great example to use. It's funny. I was with a group of construction managers, and I was walking them through this point, and somebody was like, well, my dog went through adolescence.
Nature.
Yeah. And somebody then spoke up right beside him and said, yeah, but if your dog would have been raised in the wild, it would not have gone through adolescence. So at this point, I think the people could go, oh, well, yeah, but something crazy is happening in people's brains at those points. As humans, as we develop, we know there's a lot that's going on in the brain. It's completely on fire during that phase. So what do we do about it, right? And we're going to affirm stuff is happening in the brain. And I don't want to take us there too soon, so you can stop me. But society's figured that out for thousands of years. Something has to happen for people when they're in this phase. All this is happening in their brain, and it's a learned wisdom that we've just stopped doing.
So just comment on this for a minute too, because I can imagine the tension of seeing this play out in the marketplace, in the business, where you're wanting your younger employees, younger generation to step into the moment, to be more like that 1880 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I can also see the parent that's like, well, hold on a second, this is too rough. I'm not just going to push my kids out of the nest like a mama bird. That's savage, and that's a recipe for disaster. Do you feel the tension?
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. And the tension here was relevant for companies, which is why we put it in the book, because you now, as an organization or as a team leader, have to grow people up in a way that society didn't. So what we did was we stopped doing thousands of years old wisdom here, giving kids at that phase an identity shift or an identity ritual. So for most cultures for thousands of years that were advanced and developed in any kind of way and sustained, they figured out, hey, at 11 or 12 or 13, they need to go through some kind of ritual because their brain is on fire. They wouldn't have thought about it that way or talked about it that way.
They saw it.
Exactly. They saw it. They
Yeah.
saw, I mean, you think of, we were joking about this last night at a family dinner. How did we figure out how to smoke meat, right? We had some smoked meat. And, you know, at one point they were like eating it raw and then it was spoiled, and they were figuring out all of these things through tons of trial and experimentation. And one of the things that they were figuring out was when we take people through an identity ritual, the little boy goes out and kills the animal and comes back and sleeps in the cave or whatever. When we give them this experience, it shifts something in them. They bolt down who they are. So while all this is going on, they have a sense of direction and purpose, who they are, what they are to do, where they fit in the community, so that as they advance at 13, 14, and 15, these aren't wasted in between years, but they're continuing to upgrade who they are. And the sad reality is we've sold this lie that basically says you should reach a point at some stage in your development that you have everything figured out. Like, so we added adolescence in and said, let's give them some time to figure themselves out. And then we made it longer and we added high school, and then we added college years, and the APA recently made it to 25. We should give them till 25 to figure themselves out, selling this lie. At 25, you've got to figure it out. And man, what a sad reality to live in. There's things I'm continuing to figure out. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So we're nesting this conversation, this idea, in the bigger picture of what is the formula for impact? What does it look like to lead for impact? And we've been talking about that formula as right action plus the right motive. The combination of those two is a formula, is a way to lead for impact.
Yeah.
And in the previous couple episodes, we dove into the current wisdom or the current fad in leadership or an organizational space around mindfulness, and why that's a great starting point but a terrible ending point. Empathy, and why that's important and also a great starting point but needs to lead to something more. And so the trifecta then that we're going to get into today around the living this out, what it looks like, and speaking into the current fad is psychological safety.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so huge. You see it everywhere. And I think part of what really sparked so much in putting this book together was like seeing all the dumb LinkedIn posts that basically say, if you get psychological safety in your team and people can complain about whatever they need to or feel shut down and I've got to get self-care, it totally divorces this how I'm showing up from results.
Yeah.
And it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, the funny illustration I'm liking to use now right now is if my wife sent me to the grocery store, excuse me, and she said, I need you to get these 3 to 5 items. And I'm on the way to the grocery store. And because I get behind a car that really irritates me, I have to pull over and do some self-care and some breathing exercises to get to a patient calm mindset. And then I look up and there's a hot subs place, and I go in and I get a hot sub, and I enjoy that, and I feel a little drowsy, and then I take a nap, and now an hour and a half has passed, and I go home and I don't have the list. My wife goes, "Where are the items? I sent you to the grocery store." And I say, "Well, I tried to make it. You've made an environment of psychological safety in this home, and I really appreciate that. Or I'm just going to dictate my need for psychological safety and go, hey, I tried. I tried. I'm going to get one reply. And go back to the store."
Right. Finish the job.
Yeah, finish the job. I love that. Like, you're either getting it done or not.
Yeah.
And that's why so much of our context, we love working with leaders and leaders oftentimes who are business owners and founders and trying to do substantial things in the world. You either get it done or you don't.
Yeah.
And the misunderstanding of psychological safety is I'm weaponizing that term to make this culture about my validation. And what so many people don't realize is that they're doing is they're building dysfunctional environments or cultures that are the equivalent of, it's fine for your children to stay. Launching looks different than it has, right? In America, I mean, in the European system, for thousands of years, you just built an extra room on with your family. But it's the equivalent of saying to your child, you can stay in the basement as long as you want, and there's no pressure, and there's no challenge, and there's nothing you have to grow into. And maybe one day we'll hope you'll be a DoorDash driver, but, take all the time you need because this is an environment and atmosphere of psychological safety.
So I like to go to the dictionary to understand definitions. And I find that often my working understanding isn't quite accurate, or it's not, there's a fuller understanding. So in thinking about psychological safety, came across a definition from somebody who is the leading expert, Harvard professor and researcher, Amy Edmondson. She writes this: psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. I'm like, oh, well, that sounds like an appropriate application of the concept of psychological safety. My experience, though, has been it's more like a shield against a challenge. You can't challenge me. You can't make me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's rewarding passivity. Things just aren't getting done. I tried, but it didn't get done. It certainly doesn't guarantee high performance.
Yeah.
Right. And then just another thought, it's a way to avoid discomfort, whether that's the challenge or accountability or whatever. It's just a way to avoid discomfort. So in application, that's how I see it played out, even though the fuller definition makes a little bit more sense of what we're what we're trying to get at here. It is both space, but also accountability and performance. It's a both and thing.
Yeah. And this isn't about being harsh, because all bad ideas, bad interpretations crop up out of a need. And so, you think about this, the world we live in today, and the hockey stick of growth in a negative way with mental health and anxiety in the first world. So what comes out of that is well-meaning people who don't understand how to build an environment that is healthy, how to build a culture that's going to have impact. These risk factors crop in, and one of these risk factors, we say it in different ways, is we have to give space for people to be where they are. That we can't just crush them with standards of performance and be harsh. And the reason you can't do that is because most people think they're an adult because they completed a high school education. They went to a high school graduation, and the valedictorian gave a speech and said, "We're all adults now." So in their minds, they're adults, and they're suffocating under all this anxiety because they haven't been trained to know who they are apart from what they do. And so because there's no difference between who they are and what they do, those are conflated. And then every time they hit a hard time, they feel a sense of humiliation. And it hits them in their identity rather than humility, right? I mean, I try to normalize this with my kids. Like when something works and we're having an encouraging conversation, I'm like, look, you just got to know for the 10 things that work in a year, 90 things don't. So there's all kinds of learning. And if we don't feel humiliated from the loss, we can just be humble and go, what was the education here, and get better. Well, we were talking about this in our weekly one-to-one this morning. But what's underneath it getting better? And I like the definition. I would prefer a definition that also had a lot more in it about like getting it done.
Yeah.
But what's great about the definition is you can't get to the getting it done without a rigorous, awesome conversation. And so an individual is going to innovate an idea. What if we? And it could be a wild turn, it could be a reinvention, or it could be an upgrade or improvement of a standard or a structure or a system.
We had one of those just this morning between you and I.
Booyah, we did. And if we don't have an environment of psychological safety, then we get defensive, you know, and I've got to be right, or I don't want to be wrong, I don't want to be stupid. So I appreciate the definition because it does lay a foundation for it is rigorous conversation where there's no defense mechanisms or self-preservation that create the context for the best ideas to get improved, executed well. And then we got to go out and do it. And when we don't do it, we learn from it. Without psychological safety, we confuse who we are with what we do.
Yeah.
And all the negatives happen.
You know this. I know this because we live it. We experience it. This is some ancient wisdom here. But this researcher, Amy at Edmondson, also says this: psychological safety is not the goal. How might we say that?
Yeah.
It's a good starting point.
That's awesome.
But it's not the goal. It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
It is a way to create the space for the candor, the accountability, the risk taking, for the mistake making to happen, all with the eye toward growing things up, growing self up, growing us up, growing organization up.
Yeah. And so many people have never really in their own minds learn the difference between being and doing. So you can't give what you don't have. They can't build a team culture or atmosphere that separates being and doing. And when we can operate that way, we can say to people, like, I'm glad you're here. You're here because you're different than me. I want your ideas. Let's have a rigorous conversation. I'm going to champion that culture. I'm going to champion how we get better and how we learn. And it's okay to make mistakes. So we're separating being and doing. And just very few people have had that experience in their life.
Yeah. So mindfulness, empathy, and now psychological safety, elements, starting points, but the overall goal is impact. And the formula, just as a reminder, right action plus right motive, the action you take plus the motive behind it is the formula for impact. Any last thoughts before we close this episode?
Yeah, just on this idea of like the motive is what's so huge, because when you're building an environment so that you can feel good about who you are, you're going to lead in such an insecure way and you don't even know you're doing it. You're building with the wrong goal in mind. The goal, and this is why well-meaning leadership is so dangerous. The goal isn't this place where we can have the rigorous conversation. The goal isn't we can be in this place that we just learned. There's a real mission to be accomplished. Stuff is on the line, and we've got to figure out how to get to the goal. And the goal may change, it may upgrade, but we're not going to know that if we're not in a real place of application of the learning. And I think so much of, I think about it like an abstract, so much of what we do is abstracted away from real results. So for most of human history, and I'm not glorifying it in a way like we got to go back to it, for most of human history, the crop came in or it didn't, right? We had food for the winter or we didn't. And so now, you can live in a world where you're a salaried team member. There's an abstraction way away from what is really working and not. And then you can live in a perpetual cycle of not learning how to get it done and deliver results. And that's what's so dangerous for your awareness or your mindset. It's why we also champion leadership. Because leadership has to get to the store. or has to coordinate 10 people getting to the store.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to come back with whatever was on the list, or there has to be a good reason why we bought this pineapple and not that pineapple. That's a throwback to some earlier stuff. And if we don't, then it's a failure of leadership. Leadership is not just your intention. It's the ability to get it done.
Well said.
Right on.
All right. Well, the book is Lead for Impact. We are part of SiteShift. You can learn more at siteshift.com, SIGHT shift.com. He's Chris. I'm Mark. Pleasure to be with you. We'll see you again next time.
Peace.
Thanks so much for being with us on the SiteShift podcast. I hope in some way we've encouraged you to face, lean into, and become aware of the moments that represent so much transformation possibility. If you want more, you can always go to SiteShift, SIGHT shift.com, and learn to make culture your edge.